Hi, so today we're going to be talking about all things sensory processing. You might be hearing a lot of different terms like integration, processing, vestibular, proprioception, thresholds. It might be really overwhelming right now, but take a deep breath, be gentle with yourselves. We're going to break it all down. This is meant to be a general overview of sensory processing so you can better understand how our bodies work and challenges that might occur. As we work more closely with you and your child, we'll be able to customize a plan to best support all your needs. And if it's still confusing, let us know all your comments, questions, and concerns. We're here to help and support you and your child and your family. And there are also timestamps in the description of this video, so please feel free to jump around. First, we're going to cover some terms that you might be hearing a lot. There are many resources out there that might use these terms a little differently, but this is how we use them here at Bearfoot. So let's start with sensory integration. Sensory integration is an unconscious process of the brain to organize sensations for an adapted response. An adapted response is a purposeful, goal-directed response to a sensory experience. It's a thought or action that helps us move, learn, master challenges, play, work, and enjoy a variety of sensations. For example, a child sees a toy. The adapted response to the visual sense is to move toward the toy, grab it, and play with it. When sensory integration abilities are working, children respond to the environment efficiently, creatively, and satisfyingly, which doesn't always mean calmly. For example, it's an adapted response for a baby to scream and giggle when you tickle them. And when you hear those giggles, your adapted response is probably going to be continue tickling them so you can keep hearing those laughs. Jane Ayres, an occupational therapist very well known for her work in sensory integration, has put it simply, fun is a child's word for sensory integration. When kids can respond to sensations effectively, they can have fun, learn, and thrive. The next term is sensory processing. Sensory processing is a part of sensory integration. The brain detects sensory information, which are then taken in, filtered, and organized. Sensory processing is a crucial part of sensory integration in order to generate efficient adapted responses. Another term we want to cover is sensory processing disorder. Sensory processing disorder is a disruption in the brain's ability to intake, process, and respond to sensory information. We can think of efficient sensory processing like well-organized traffic, like you're breezing through the highway and reaching your destination with a smooth drive. Sensory processing disorder is like a rush hour traffic jam, where the route to your destination is a bit bumpy. Sensory processing disorder is currently not an official diagnosis recognized in the DSM, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. However, there is more and more research to support its existence. Hopefully, it will be recognized soon so your child can receive all the support they deserve from a variety of settings and professionals. And now, it might sound overwhelming and scary to hear disorder. We prefer to say sensory preferences. Every child is different and has their own strengths and challenges. We're here to give you the tools to best support your child and their sensory preferences. Now we'll get into self-regulation. Self-regulation is the ability to manage sensory responses, emotions, and behaviors. It's the ability to adjust the level of arousal to match the demands of the environment. When we say arousal, we mean our performance level or how awake or alert we are. Each task and environment has its own expectations and demands, requiring different levels of arousal. For example, a library requires us to stay quiet, whereas a playground requires more energy and engagement. Our level of arousal fluctuates throughout the day as we transition between our daily activities. Sometimes we might feel tired, distracted, stressed, or excited, and we find ways to get into a more productive state to do all the things we need to do. For example, we might wake up feeling tired, so we have a cup of coffee so we can get to work. And when we're hungry, we eat. Some children might have trouble with self-regulation to get them into a more optimal state to engage in their daily activities. A child with self-regulation challenges may have trouble shifting gears from running and screaming on the playground mode to sit at a desk in class mode, or vice versa. They may have difficulty calming down to fall asleep at night. They may also have trouble interpreting different sensory experiences. For example, they may interpret a gentle pat on the shoulder as dangerous. We'll talk more about sensory responses later. They may also have trouble regulating their emotions. For example, consider a child playing Foursquare with his friends and getting upset when he lost. He can self-regulate by taking deep breaths and continue playing and having fun. If he doesn't self-regulate, he might explode and make it a not-so-fun experience for him and his friends. As you can see from this image, self-regulation is super complex. It requires complex thinking skills like knowing how we're feeling and what we need, focusing on a task or shifting gears to focus on a new task, being able to control strong emotions like anger, anxiety, embarrassment, or excitement, being able to control our impulses, and initiating a self-regulation strategy. It takes a lot of work, and these are skills that we develop over time. Now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty details of sensory processing. Like food nourishes the body, sensations nourish the brain to provide knowledge needed to direct the mind and the body. We have 7 sensory systems that detect sensations from both outside and inside the body. We have our visual system, our sense of sight, auditory system, sense of hearing, oral system, sense of taste, olfactory system, sense of smell, tactile system, sense of touch, from touching something else or from something else touching you, vestibular, our sense of movement of our body and position of our head, proprioceptive system, sense of body awareness, or where our body is in space, from the detection of stretch and tension within the muscles and the joints. And we'll go through each sensory system in much more detail later. Sensory processing occurs in the nervous system. The nervous system includes the brain, spinal cord, and nerves that spread throughout the body. Nerves, also called neurons, are units of the nervous system that tell us about our body and the environment, as well as produce and direct actions and thoughts. The nervous system takes in sensory information to produce awareness, perception, knowledge, body posture, movement, emotions, thoughts, memories, and learning. It has a huge job. So how do you know if your child has sensory processing challenges? This is a general list of clues from the Star Institute, an organization specializing in treatment, education, and research for sensory processing disorders. However, every child is different and may have different strengths and challenges. This is definitely not an exhaustive list. Perhaps when your child was an infant or a toddler, you noticed problems with their eating or sleeping, preference for one person for comfort, irritability with dressing, lack of play, resistance to cuddling or being held, inability to calm themselves, floppy or stiff body, or motor delays. Maybe when your child was a preschooler, you noticed oversensitivity to touch, noises, smells, or people, difficulty making friends, difficulty dressing, eating, sleeping, and or toileting, clumsiness, poor motor skills or weakness, need to be in a constant motion or lack of personal space, or frequent or long tantrums. And as they grow older, maybe you noticed continued sensitivity to touch, noises, smells, and people, limited attention, fidgeting, need for movement, aggression, easily overwhelmed, difficulty with writing or motor activities, difficulty making friends, lack of awareness of pain or people. Again, every child is different. These are common signs of sensory processing challenges, but definitely not the end-all be-all. Sensory processing challenges can affect all aspects of daily life. It can affect development from a young age, complex thinking skills, and the ability to learn and thrive at school, For example, over-responsivity to sights and sounds can make it really hard to pay attention in class. It can affect making friends and socializing. Maybe a child with over-responsivity to tactile input may make them want to constantly bump into their peers. It can affect coordination and motor skills. Perhaps a child under-responsive to proprioceptive input or body awareness can have challenges coordinating their movements. And most importantly, it can affect play and having fun. So for example, over-responsivity to vestibular input or movement can make a child avoid the playground and limit their interactions with their peers. And so that's where occupational therapy comes in. In your child's evaluation, you might have seen the quote, "Occupational therapy is a therapeutic use of everyday life activities or occupations for the purpose of participation in roles and situations in home, community, and other settings. Occupational therapy addresses the individual needs of each child and his or her family, facilitates competence and independence in daily activities, and promotes healthy development and self-fulfillment for long-term wellness." To put it simply, we make sure your child and your family are able to do the things that you all need to do and want to do to promote your child's overall health and quality of life. We do this by collaborating with your family and professionals on your child's team, including teachers, physicians, psychologists, speech-language pathologists, or physical therapists. We identify your child's strengths, challenges, and interests to create a match between your child, the environment, and the activities they need or want to do through modification. We provide you with the tools and strategies to support your child in their daily routines, tasks, and interactions. We also help your child better understand their sensory needs and provide them with tools to promote their own self-advocacy. And we do a lot of this through play. But we're really using goal-directed and purposeful activities that look like play, so it's more engaging and motivating for your child. We have the expertise to help your child develop necessary skills while having fun. While every child processes sensations differently, there are 4 common patterns. These patterns are recognized as Winnie Dunn's model of sensory processing, and Winnie Dunn is another occupational therapist and expert in sensory processing. According to Winnie Dunn, sensory processing occurs through the interaction between a child's neurological threshold and their behavioral responses. We'll first talk about this vertical line, which is the continuum for neurological thresholds. Neurological thresholds indicate how intense stimuli or sensory information has to be noticed. At the top is a high threshold, meaning that a lot of intense stimuli is needed to be noticed. For example, a child with a high threshold may need a loud call and taps on the shoulder to get their attention. Those with high thresholds are also considered under-responsive because they need a lot of stimuli. On the bottom is a low threshold, meaning that little stimuli is needed to be noticed. For example, a child with a low threshold may notice quiet whispers. Those with low thresholds are considered over-responsive because they react to very little stimuli. And now we'll talk about this horizontal line, which is the continuum for self-regulation behavioral responses. Behavioral responses indicate how a child reacts to stimuli. On the left are passive strategies. A child with passive strategies may not react to stimuli and just let it happen, even though it's uncomfortable for them. For example, a child may have an outburst when they smell something they don't like, but they don't step away from it. On the right are active strategies. A child with active strategies responds immediately to stimuli. For example, a child may leave the room when they smell something they don't like. The child is actively reacting to the stimuli to regulate themselves. Now we'll talk about patterns of sensory processing for those with high thresholds. On the top left are low registration patterns, or the bystanders. These are children with high thresholds and low activity. They need a lot of input and react passively and don't seek input. They miss sensory cues more than others and can focus in environments often perceived as distracting. They may often look tired, uninterested, withdrawn, easygoing. These are the ho-hum kids that are kind of aloof. On the top right are seeking patterns, or the seekers. These are children with high thresholds and high activity. They love sensory input. They want more because they need more. They often look really active, constantly moving, always fidgeting. They actively seek input. They might touch everything or look at everything. Now we'll talk about patterns of sensory processing for those with low thresholds. On the bottom left are sensitivity patterns, or sensors. These are children with low thresholds and low activity. They notice everything and have trouble blocking out stimuli. They try to participate and often get overwhelmed. They may not respond or act immediately and sometimes have outbursts after being overstimulated instead of during. On the bottom right are avoiding patterns, or avoiders. These are children with low thresholds and high activity. They notice everything, have big reactions, and withdraw from input. They may be easily distracted. They may perceive unpredictable things as dangerous, and they may be unwilling to try new things. So now that we talked about patterns of sensory processing, we'll dive deeper into processing of each of the sensory systems. We'll first talk about the big three. While there are 7 sensory systems, the vestibular, proprioception, and tactile systems are our big three. These 3 power sensations lay the foundation for sensory processing. Other systems can't process if these 3 aren't working properly. The first big system is the vestibular system. This is the foundational, unifying system for all the others. The sensations are processed in reference to vestibular information. The vestibular system is located in the inner ear and tells us about our relationship to gravity and our body in space. It tells us whether we're moving or still, or whether objects are moving or still in relation to our body. It also tells us about our speed, acceleration and deceleration, and the direction we're moving. The vestibular system receives information when the head bends to one side, up or down, or moves in any direction that changes the pull of gravity. The vestibular system is developed in utero and is well developed by the 5th month. It receives sensory input when we are still or moving. Examples of movement include running, jumping, bouncing, climbing, swinging, or somersaulting, or sliding. The vestibular system supports balance, coordination, motor control of the eye, confidence in our movement, posture, spatial orientation, and protective reflexes. It also promotes physical, emotional, and psychosocial regulation and well-being. These big 3 sensory systems are essential for regulation. Vestibular input causes release of histamine, a neurochemical. Neurochemicals are substances released by the body that affect the nervous system. Histamine affects arousal, alertness, wakefulness, and reaction time. It's important to note that we can have too much histamine, and we can use proprioceptive input to balance it out. We'll talk more about that later. When the vestibular system is functioning properly, we feel secure, organized, and confident in our bodies. We have gravitational security, or we feel secure when our feet are off the ground. We are able to balance and control our bodies. We also feel regulated so we can respond to other sensory input. When the vestibular system has difficulty processing, it can cause over-responsivity or under-responsivity. When children are over-responsive, they notice stimuli easily and respond quickly and intensely. When children are under-responsive, they may be unaware of stimuli and respond slowly and less intensely. As we go through each sensory system, we'll talk about a few common challenges. Of course, these are not the end-all be-all and may or may not be relevant to your child. Over-responsivity to vestibular input can include fear or intolerance of movement. These kids can also have gravitational insecurity. These children may avoid activities with movement, become easily dizzy or nauseated, resist being passively moved like being picked up, or avoid novel experiences. Under-responsive kids can appear like they're constantly moving. They may have decreased posture, coordination, balance, or spatial awareness. They may be unaware of the sensation of falling and have frequent falls while being slow to protect themselves. They may seem impulsive if they're seeking input to meet their thresholds. Here are some general activities to promote vestibular input. This is just to give you an idea of different types of vestibular movements. These are not meant to be a solution, and they're definitely not a one-size-fits-all. So you have to do some trial and error to see what works with your child. We'll collaborate with you to recommend appropriate activities that fits your child's interests and needs, as well as the needs of you and your family. Some ideas are swinging, climbing, jumping, dancing, animal walks like bear walks or frog jumps, balancing, and obstacle courses. And how do you know if these strategies are working? Change will probably happen slowly and incrementally. We're not looking to go from 0 to 100. You'll have to be really observant and celebrate the small milestones. Maybe you notice that your child is calmer. Perhaps they're more focused or can focus for a few more minutes than before, from 1 minute to 3 minutes to 5 minutes. Maybe they're more engaged in different tasks and participate for a little bit longer. Or maybe they're a little more tolerant to sensory input and react a little bit less, or for a shorter period of time. If you notice these changes, keep doing what you're doing. The second big system is the proprioceptive system, often called prop. Proprioceptive input is detected through contraction and stretch of our muscles and skin, and as well as movement of our joints. This system also tells us about our body in space and how our body parts relate to one another, whether we're moving or still. It tells us how to time our movements and how much force to exert, like writing without breaking the pencil lead. The proprioceptive system is developed in utero and continues to develop through movement and tactile input. It's closely related to the vestibular system, as both help us develop body awareness, inform our sense of posture and balance, and help us to stabilize our head and eyes during movement. Prop is also crucial for self-regulation. It causes release of serotonin, another neurochemical that's a major regulator. Serotonin is known as a happy hormone that helps us feel calm and organized. We mentioned that you can have too much histamine or vestibular input, and prop can help balance that out. When the proprioceptive system is functioning properly, we move in an efficient and coordinated way. We know where different parts of our body are and how they move. We also know how much strength to use. Over-responsive kids can appear to move slower and clumsier. They may seem like they have decreased body awareness and posture. They may use little force or pressure when completing activities like writing. Under-responsive kids can appear to often bump into objects. They may seem often in other people's personal spaces. They might use a lot of force or pressure when completing activities, and they might seek additional prop input to stay regulated. Here are general ideas for activities that provide proprioceptive input. You might see some repeating ones from the vestibular activity list since they provide more than just one type of input. Climbing, animal walks, pillow fights, deep pressure from massages, hugs, or squeezes, weight-bearing activities like push-ups, lifting activities like carrying a box, resistance activities like pushing or pulling. The third power system is a tactile system. The tactile system is the largest sensory system and the first sense to form in utero. Not only does it detect touch, but pressure, vibration, texture, heat, cold, pain, and movements of hairs on the skin. It can also detect danger as input is processed in the brainstem, which is the part of our brain that determines whether a stimulus is dangerous, our fight or flight response center. The tactile system, like vestibular and prop systems, is also essential for regulation. It causes release of dopamine, also known as a pleasure hormone, and deep touch releases large amounts of dopamine compared to light touch. Dopamine is calming and counteracts adrenaline and cortisol. Adrenaline and cortisol are hormones involved in the body's fight or flight and stress responses. When the tactile system is functioning properly, we are also able to feel secure and organized in our bodies. We can focus, respond, and filter tactile input to interact effectively with the environment, so we're not bothered by sensations like the feeling of our shirt, touch from others, or glue on our hands. We can play in different textures like sand, brush our teeth, wash our hands, take a shower, or eat a variety of textures. Over-responsivity can look like avoidance of certain foods, clothing, textures, messes, physical contact, or hugs. These kids may hate grooming and hygiene tasks like brushing their hair or teeth, taking baths, or dressing. Under-responsivity can look like unawareness to tactile input, like noticing if their hands are dirty. They may try to touch everything and love hugs and being close to others. They may also play aggressively because they seek that touch sensation. Activities for tactile input include play in a variety of textures like dirt, sand, grass, or water. Sensory bins, which you can create by filling a box with a variety of toys hidden in different textured materials like rice, beans, or nuts. Finger play in a variety of textures like paint, shaving cream, bubbles, Play-Doh, or deep pressure from massages and squeezes. Next, we have the auditory system. The development of auditory structures, neurosensory abilities, and function begin in utero and continue to develop throughout the first 5 years of life. There are 2 parts of the ear to interpret sound. What is it? And send sound to the brain to generate a response. What should I do? When the auditory system is functioning well, we can listen, communicate, socialize, filter out irrelevant sounds, and respond to relevant sounds in the environment. Over-responsive kids may cover their ears in reaction to sounds or react intensely to sudden high-pitched noises by crying, screaming, becoming angry. They may avoid everyday noises, like the toilet flushing. Under-responsive kids can look to appear unaware of sounds. They may have difficulty responding to auditory input, like looking when they're called or following directions. They may often use an outside voice and make loud noises. Now we have the olfactory system, or sense of smell. This system is developed in utero and is well organized by birth. It tells us if a smell is pleasurable, noxious, or dangerous. It is closely related to the limbic system, which is involved in behavioral and emotional responses, so smells can activate emotions and memories. When the olfactory system is functioning well, we're able to tolerate a variety of odors and foods. We can distinguish between good or bad smells, like fresh or spoiled milk. Over-responsive kids may gag, avoid, or become frustrated in response to certain smells or foods. Mealtimes might be really challenging. Under-responsive kids might enjoy strong scents and smell objects and people constantly. They might not notice dangerous smells like smoke. Now we have the oral system. The system is developed in utero and is well developed by 12 to 19 months. It allows us to determine temperature, texture, and taste of foods and drinks. It also gives us information about potentially harmful substances. The oral system also receives proprioceptive input from our jaw when we bite and chew. It also contributes to oral motor skills, saliva production, and speech. When the oral system is functioning well, we are able to eat, tolerate, and try a variety of foods, tastes, and textures. We're able to tolerate oral experiences like brushing our teeth or going to the dentist. Over-responsive kids may be known as the picky eaters and avoid certain food textures or trying new foods. They may have difficulty with brushing their teeth. They may also gag, choke, and drool in response to oral input. Under-responsive kids can bite and chew on non-food items like clothing, hands, pencils, or toys. They might prefer spicy or hot foods or make sounds with their mouths like humming to receive more oral input. Lastly, we have the visual system. There are many components to vision, which are developed through the second year of age through movement. This system takes in light information and relates them to other sensory input, including those from muscles, joints, and the vestibular system. It gives us a basic awareness of the environment, time, as we see things as they occur sequentially, and location of objects. When the visual system is functioning well, we can focus on important visual input and ignore irrelevant information. We also have good visual motor skills to produce body movements in response to visual information. We have visual perceptual skills to make sense of what we're seeing. Vision is pretty complex and not just the ability to see. For example, efficient visual processing allows us to read efficiently, remember what an orange looks like from memory, copy a triangle, or recognize the letter A in different orientations and styles. Over-responsive kids may cover their eyes or squint in response to visual input. They might avoid bright flickering lights. They may also be scared of moving objects, like ducking when a ball is thrown at them. Under-responsive kids may stare at bright lights and moving objects. They might observe items held close to their face. They may appear unaware of people or things in their environment. And when reading, they might lose their place on the page. Well, we made it. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen and learn more about your child. Please let us know if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. And if you're thinking that you're still not sure about what to do, don't worry. We're here to help and give you individualized occupational therapy. We'll continue to work with you, your family, and your child to create the most effective and feasible therapy program. We really appreciate your trust in supporting your loved one, and we really can't wait to continue working with you all. Bye.